Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the last, presumably the last session of studying the Wishfulfilling Jewel, Chidrup Yishinobu, the outer sadhana of the Wishfulfilling Jewel from the Longchen Yingti. Okay, how is the sound now? Can you hear me? Sound is fine. Okay, good. All right, excellent. So this time, just as so, this will be the last session on this particular text. The following text will be Mindfulness in Action, which shouldn't be confused with a work called Meditation in Action. And it's instructions by Jakob Rinpoche on the practice of meditation. And we'll be starting this, when is it again? I think it's the 19th of February. Yeah, the 19th of February, because there's going to be, here where I am, there's going to be some activities around Tongsa Khyentse Rinpoche visiting Australia. There's going to be some teachings and drupchans and so on. So everything will be a little bit up in the air with regards to what's happening. So I thought better just start in February, and then there's a chance of having some regular sessions from then onwards. Okay, good. So just with regards to lineage masters, last time we looked at one of the really great and important masters in the Nyingma tradition, which was Tara Glingpa, who was a great Dzogchen master and treasure revealer. And Tara Glingpa is interesting because he, just like we have it in the Sakyapas, with the Sakya-Chinzens, where it's actually a bloodline. It runs in the family. Then similarly also in the case of the Minderling tradition, it's a family line where there's generally they have succeeded in having a son who was the throne holder, a son who was a monk, and a daughter who then held particularly then the Dzogchen transmissions. And presently nowadays we have Ngondro Rinpoche, who is a daughter of the last Minling Chichen, who is a very prominent teacher in the context of modern Buddhism. So probably many of you have heard about her. But the first Mingyur Paldron was an exceptional child whose father was very impressed with her spirituality. And although he had quite a few children, I think there were 5 children in all, then he said that the principal lineage holder was going to be his daughter. So she trained with him until she was 18. I think then that's when he passed away. And she received many teachings also from her uncle, who is the brother of Tada Glingpa. His name was Lochen Dharmashri, and we have a lot of great commentaries and teachings and so on from Lochen. So she was a student of his, and then she essentially practiced and became very accomplished in practice, and had great realization, and which she already had actually from when she was very young. And her father actually empowered her as lineage master already when she was very, very young. She could also remember her previous life as Yeshe Tsogel, and also as a great master called Nasa Urbum, who was also a woman. If you look in the Tsultrim Alione's Women of Wisdom, Nasa Urbum's life story is in there. So she became a very important teacher during some time with upheavals. There was invasions from what is called, in the early 18th century, you had the Dzungar Mongols who invaded Tibet, and they also destroyed the Mindraling monastery to a large extent. Mingyur Palden managed to escape to Sikkim, and there's still a temple in Sikkim, Pema Yangtze, which she founded, and they're still practicing the Mindraling teachings there. I think they also practice some other things, but they certainly also include then the Mindraling teachings. I'll be leading a tour there, by the way, if anybody's interested in April. Anyway, she returned to Tibet, and she was responsible for rebuilding the Mindraling monastery. And as I mentioned last time, Mindraling really became probably the sort of most honored and respected Nyingma monastery. They were famous for their tremendous discipline. Remember Nyoshu Kempo, he would say you could hear a pin drop in the assembly hall when everyone assembled there. Also for example, in my tradition, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche came from a monastery called Shichen. And Shichen was actually founded by a student of Therak Lingpa, and it was modeled on the Mindraling, the way that everything was practiced in Mindraling. Anyway, Mingyur Palden was then entrusted and held this important Dzogchen teaching called the Atu Saplin Nyingpo. And this teaching then she upheld. She wrote many important commentaries that are still studied, and this tradition continues until the present day. So that was Mingyur Palden. I'm thinking to continue these, just referring to lineage masters also in the context of the next work. So we'll continue with other lineage masters next time as well. Okay, then our text. Where we're just at the last section, sort of concluding advice. Just an essential, you could say, summary of what we're doing. There's somewhere here where Rinpoche was referring to how the essential practice really is to simply visualize and sustain this sense of the presence of the teacher. That is the key element of the practice. When we talk about visualization, and this is actually just sort of in general, very often people say, I have a difficulty visualizing this, it's difficult to visualize that, and so forth. It's interesting, you don't really have that among Tibetans a whole lot. I mean, of course, if you were to visualize many, many deities in great detail, sure, it is something that is difficult. But overall, visualization is not seen as something that is impossibly difficult, because what we are essentially doing with visualization is not so much some incredible feat in terms of the focus on detail as such, even though that is recommended if we can do it. But visualization mainly means to sustain the presence of deity or the teacher. So it's carrying with us this sense of the presence of the sacred as embodied in the teacher, as embodied in the deity, but particularly the teacher, because the presence of the teacher is something that we can relate to. So if you, for example, think of, let's say, your own mother or somebody, you don't actually need to visualize them in great detail. They come to mind quite vividly just by the mere thought of them. And of course, yes, you will deepen that if you think of their face, if you think of how they were dressed or things like that. But the main thing is this presence. So visualization should not be seen as something that's like incredibly difficult or complicated. The details are intended to help. So if I think of my mother, and sometimes I'll be thinking of how my mother would dress, or maybe features of her, sure. But the notion that I should go into some incredibly detail with it, just for example, if I think of my mother's hair, her hairdo, or what she would wear, it kind of just comes fairly easily if I don't strain too much. So this practice of visualization is intended to invoke the presence of the teacher, and in extension of the teacher, also sometimes deity and so forth. But it is essentially something that brings into our experience, the field of our experience, this sacred dimension. And then also what's important here in this advice is what Khyentse Rinpoche says, a Dharma practitioner should be able to cope with all possible circumstances. So when we're practicing, this enables us to cope with whatever happens. We inevitably will have difficult circumstances, and even if we have positive circumstances, it's also essential that we integrate whatever experience there is. So we've talked about the value then of, here it is. It is said that if we just visualize our root guru with great clarity and vividness for an instant, it is of greater benefit than meditating upon 100,000 other deities. So this essential practice of Guru Yoga is basic to whatever we do. And last time we also looked at what we call the completion stage practices, the yogas and so forth. Anyway, as far as what we're doing on the Buddhist path, which is penetrating, you could say eliminating, freeing ourselves from the delusion of the self-centered, insecure, dualistic mind that struggles with the notion of self and other. In terms of cutting through all of that, the presence of Guru Yoga, or rather the practice of Guru Yoga, is essential. But what we're doing with the practice of Guru Yoga is invoking something that was always there, and this we refer to as the inherent wisdom. So Khyentse Rinpoche says, and this is where he then comes with this famous quote, he says, if we aspire to the realization of vast perspective or deeper insight, vipassana, it is said, the realization of your inherent wisdom is the fruit of accumulations, purifications, and the blessings of a realized master. You should know that it is senseless to rely on any other method. So this we've often seen, and you can see all the elements of the practice of the preliminary practices, the Ngondro, are implicit here. The accumulations that gather the necessary conditions for the practice of the path, purification, eliminating the confusion that is external to us, and particularly then the presence of embodied enlightenment as reflected in our teacher, and that which enables us to have a sense of what enlightenment is about, bring about a sense of recognition of something that we have within, which is then what we call blessings. Also, there's a famous quote that says, whoever wants to find the wisdom beyond intellect without praying to his guru is someone waiting for the sun to shine in a cave facing north. He will never realize appearances and his mind to be one. This obviously doesn't apply to the southern hemisphere. Here in the southern hemisphere, places like Australia, if you have a house facing north, you'll get plenty of sun. But basically, of course, the implication is that if you're not doing what it takes for this wisdom to manifest in your life, which is invoking the presence of the teacher, then it's basically attempting the impossible. And it's there. And this is rather important in terms of what is Vajrayana. They will never realize appearances and mind to be one. It's with the practice of the Guru Yoga that we are able to integrate all the field of our experiences. And this is basic to all of Vajrayana. We integrate all appearances. Of course, what it says in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and so forth. This understanding that appearances and emptiness are inseparable are really integrated on an immediate experiential level in the Vajrayana in terms of the various practices that all essentially are founded on this experience of the teacher's presence. That's where we begin to realize appearances, all our perceptions, and the mind as inseparable and fused with the nature of the teacher. So this is where this practice of devotion, this practice of bhakti, this practice of praying to the teacher is essential. It says, as Guru Yoga is the ultimate method of realizing the natural state of all things, it is, as stated in the text, the core of the natural state, meaning Guru Yoga is the core of all the practices we call Mahamudra, Dzogchen, so on. By the term core, we mean the hidden essence, which may not be evident, but is at the heart of everything. There are countless instructions for the development, completion, and great perfection stages. All these practices that we refer to in terms of sadhana, in terms of yoga, in terms of dzogchen, in terms of the tantras, maha, anu, ati, and so forth, all of these instructions there are, and some people say, oh, there's so many, but they actually all have an incredibly profound core of simplicity, which is this practice of Guru Yoga. And so that's where it says all these countless instructions for the development, completion, and great perfection stage. There are all of these, but they all exist in condensed form within Guru Yoga. Guru Yoga is like the vital link it's like a vital link in a chain to which all other instructions are tied. It is a practice that is easy to undertake, has no real difficulties or risk of deviation, and will lead to supreme fruition. As a skillfully devised machine can accomplish in 1 hour the work of hundreds of laborers, here a single instruction gathers all the others within itself. No instruction, no matter how profound, is excluded. Guru Yoga is the main method for furthering progress in our practice and for dispelling all hindrances. It is the one which accomplishes all. Technically, Guru Yoga is part of the so-called preliminary practices, but in fact, it is the heart of the main practice. So in the teachings, we often speak about the preliminary practices and the main practice. So the practice of Ngondro, preliminary practices, then culminates in the practice of Guru Yoga, but then Guru Yoga is, of course, then the foundation of all what we call the main practice. And the main practice are then all of the practices that we refer to as sadhana practice or dzogchen or the various yoga practices and all of that. This means that in the main practice, we are integrating the direct experience of Buddha nature and making that the path. So that is the actual heart of Vajrayana. But without the Guru Yoga, we'll just be doing ritual, we'll just be doing external exercises. And the practice and the intention behind these practices will be completely lost. And that is where people then come from the outside and they just say, oh, these Tibetans are doing a lot of ritual. You know, they're really into all this ritual. I guess it makes them feel good. Or the Tibetans love ritual. It's got nothing to do with loving anything. It's not got nothing to do with anything Tibetan even. It's just Vajrayana. And Vajrayana integrates skillfully so many different dimensions of our existence. And so, yes, there are references to aspects of our doings and activities, but it's always from the point of view in Vajrayana sadhana and practice, from the point of view of provocatively introducing this unity of appearances and emptiness, introducing this wider perspective, this vipassana. And that is achieved through the blessing of the Guru Yoga. So the Guru Yoga is essential to all the main practice of the Vajrayana. Rinpoche continues saying, within all the different schools of the Buddhist teachings, be they Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, or Gelug, there is not a single path that does not take Guru Yoga as its main foundation. In the Sakya tradition, we find the well-known teaching of Lamdre, the simultaneous practice of path and fruition. There too, we would begin the practice with the profound path of Guru Yoga. In that instruction, we would receive the blessing or initiation of the body, speech, and mind of the Guru, and then would meditate upon him or her. Again, the Kagyu lineage is also known to be heir to the practice of fervent devotion. To engage in the practice of Dharma without devotion is to be like someone without a head. If you read the invocation to the Kagyu lineage, as one often does at the beginning, or one always does actually in all Kagyu ritual, then you would say that devotion is the head of meditation. Rinpoche continues, no matter how much we may practice the different branches of the path, if we lack devotion, that respectful fervor for the teacher, which allows us to see him or her as a true Buddha, then there is no chance for experiences and realization to arise within us. So if we lack that devotion, we're not really going to get it. That's also why Vajrayana can never really be understood purely from an analytical or intellectual perspective. The real understanding of Vajrayana is only really felt through this strong sense of devotion. The great Kadampa teacher, Gyaltsen Nguljo Togme, had no other main practice but to meditate on seeing his teacher, the Lord Atisha, as the true Buddha, and to serve him with body, speech, and mind his whole life. In the famous instruction in the Kadampa lineage, the 7 points of mind training, the first step is the practice of Guru Yoga. So we have this then thus in the Sakya, Kagyu, and also in what we call the Gelug tradition. We say here Kadampa tradition, but in fact that is now what we refer to as the Gelug tradition. So throughout all the different lineages of the Karma, or the oral transmission, and Terma, or revealed treasure tradition, the same is true for the Nyingma tradition. So the Nyingma lineage, it comes down through 2 styles of transmission. One is something that is very general, what we call the oral transmission, which is from master to master down through the ages. And then the Terma, or the revealed treasure, which are then the teachings Padmasambhava concealed and which were then revealed at a later time. So there's a direct, you could say, transmission directly from Padmasambhava down to the treasure revealer. So that's these 2 transmissions that we have in the Nyingma tradition. So Rinpoche says, there is no path or practice that does not begin by establishing itself within the sphere of Guru Yoga. So in this way, we can see all these 4 major traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. They're all these Vajrayana traditions are founded on the practice of Guru Yoga. Unlike the practices of the development and completion stages, Guru Yoga can be practiced at all times. If, for instance, we are practicing Kirim and Tsogrim, the practices of visualization and practices of yoga, there are many crucial points concerning bodily posture, speech, and mind that must be observed. In Kirim, when doing a retreat, we must divide our practice into 4 sessions at specific times throughout the day, and we must arrange an altar with the outer offerings of water, flower, incense, and so forth, as well as the inner offerings of Toma, Rakta, and Amrita. But Guru Yoga can be practiced at any time, under any circumstances, and yet it brings all the accomplishment of the development stage. Because with the Guru Yoga, the core of it is, as we saw earlier, is simply invoking the vivid presence of the teacher And that will pervade all our perceptions. At that time, we don't need any other external ritual. The external ritual and those aspects can be very useful in terms of engaging our habitual patterns for doing things and arranging things, and essentially it enables us to have a greater appreciation of the nature of reality, of realization, and so forth. But all of that is accomplished within this essential practice of Guru Yoga. So that's about how Guru Yoga accomplishes the practice of the development stage. Then Rinpoche says in Tsokrim, or the completion stage, the practice of the inner heat and the cultivation of various physical exercises, such as the great vase and the retention of breath and all of that, all these yoga practices, he says these present certain risks of hindrance and deviations, especially the risk of intensification of the heart lung, or heart energy. So this is a nervous condition that sometimes happens. We get this sort of anxiety or agitation that very much is centered around the prana and the energy of the prana in the heart. This is something that could become a disturbance, and he says that, and the heart energy and the subsequent disturbances of the mind that such intensification can produce. So that's where, as much as these are really profound methods of, you could say, integrating the whole dimension of our physical body and all the wisdom that's intrinsic to our physical body, the Vajra body and so forth, as much as that is a very profound path, Rinpoche continues the practice of Guru Yoga, on the other hand, involves no such danger as described here. And through it, the various lungs, or various kinds of prana, will enter naturally into the central channel, which is the objective of these yoga practices. Just as the eating of food dispels hunger immediately, the practice of Guru Yoga will generate the realization of the inherent wisdom within us. So if we want to have an actual experience of what the objective of all these practices are, this we will gain through the practice of Guru Yoga. Very often what happens also in the modern world is that these practices become objectified as something interesting and fascinating, and very often there's this like asking details about this and wondering that, and all of a sudden the essential practice, which is about realization of the vipassana that sees through self-centering and delusion, is lost in this fascination with all these fabulous, esoteric, exotic exercises. And in this way, the point of these practices is lost, because instead of it being something that's innate to us, it becomes external phenomena. And very often they're just like toys. So for some time, people will like to do a particular practice, and then after a while, they're bored with it, and then they want something else that can entertain them. And that is why the lineage masters are so insistent on establishing this foundation that is about actual realization, actual experience. And there is no interest in all these kind of silly games of, collecting data and collecting, esoteric, interesting sort of practices. That is so not the point. And while the Tibetans have a fairly down-to-earth and common sense relationship with some of these practices, then very often in the West, these practices become these objects of sort of fascination, really. So that's where, coming down to the essentials, really, is particularly achieved with the practice of Guru Yoga. Rinpoche says it's just like, actually, we are looking for something, we're hungry for something, and that is satisfied with the practice of Guru Yoga. Rinpoche says, when sleeping, when waking, when walking or working or engaging in any kind of activity, we should invoke the Guru, thinking, Lama, please look on me with kindness. If we always maintain such yearning and devotion, then our mind will become suitable for the teacher's blessings, the experience of that which is beyond the ordinary intellect. As it is said, when the mind becomes fit, the Guru does not dwell outside. Our mind has become fit if, having listened to a teacher and relying on him or her, we always remember clearly what is to be avoided and what is to be adopted, and maintain constant vigilance over our actions, words, and thoughts. So this is the practice, really, integrating our bodies, our actions, our words, and our thoughts with that of the teacher. Armed with this knowledge, we should be determined, even while dreaming, never to perform even the slightest negative action. At the same time, we should cultivate even the most minor positive actions, for just as a large container placed under a trickle of water is filled in very little time, so we can make rapid progress on the path with such attention to positive actions. If we fail to develop this kind of fit mind or mindfulness, we're likely to succumb to the force of bad habits and negative inclinations, and thus we tend to ignore what is positive. So particularly it applies within Vajrayana context, where there's such an emphasis on integrating through so many different ways, then very often these ways or methods, whatever they might be, they become sort of just games and entertainment, and the core of the practice is lost. And that unfortunately also very often involves then Vajrayana discipline, which sometimes is about going beyond the ordinary conventions. And then that's where the practice of going beyond what's conventional becomes a big deal in itself, and it just becomes silly indulging in habitual practices, whatever it might be. You sometimes have this danger of yogis wasting their time in unnecessary, unconventional activities. And the practice is lost, really. Rinpoche says, we must also develop a capacity for vigilant introspection, through which we are constantly aware of our activities from morning till night. And this is, of course, universal for all the Buddhist paths. In this way, if we recognize that we have engaged in negative actions, we should think, look at me. I have received so many teachings from my kind Guru, and yet I still fall back into negative actions. I should feel embarrassed in his presence. All the Dakas and Dakinis might be quite discouraged with me. So recognizing that we have been fortunate, we have been received teachings, empowerments, and so on from the teacher. If we don't abide by that, then you could say the force and the natural energies of that support us when we engage in the discipline, they fall away. All the strength of the Dakas and Dakinis, which are there and support those that keep pure Samaya, will be lost. Rinpoche says we should then make a clear, heartfelt confession and generate an unshakable intention to engage only in positive actions from that moment onwards. The thing is, we're free to part from these habitual patterns. So when we say confession, it means that it actually implies that we have the freedom to set aside these unhelpful practices, if these unhelpful actions, and decide and be determined to engage in positive actions. Rinpoche says if we have been able to accumulate positive actions during the course of the day, we should always remember to reinforce them through the 3 points or ideas, which is the preparation or generation of bodhicitta, which here is the intention to act on behalf of all sentient beings, the main part of the realization of emptiness combined with one-pointed concentration, and the conclusion in which any merit or benefit accruing from our actions is dedicated to the swift liberation of all beings. Rinpoche says, from our discussion of these points, we can see that mindfulness and vigilant introspection constitute the inner guru and the true root guru. It's not like someone like me, this is Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche talking, dressed in robes, sleeping on a throne, This is, of course, Rinpoche being self-deprecatory and referring to him just sort of playing the part of being the Lama, and he's also referring to sort of the sort of just self-deprecation, saying sleeping on a throne, meaning someone who's sort of is dull, you know, and so in that way, his point is, don't think that the guru is outside. Rinpoche says, if we perpetually maintain such mindfulness and vigilance, we will accumulate positive actions and discard negative ones without difficulty. Okay, how is the sound right now? By the way, I went back and was just looking at the video from last time, and it seems to me that the sound was pretty bad in the later part of the recording. But I checked the audio, so the audio recording from last time should be okay. In general, there wouldn't be any trouble with the audio recordings ever, because this is just being recorded right here, where of course the webinar itself is a little bit prone to all the ups and downs that internet network very often has, yeah. So, you know, upload speeds and all these things. Audio recordings, you can rely on them pretty much. Okay. No questions? Okay. All right. I'll keep going. Ah, there is one. Experientially understand the fusing of my mind with my teacher. How do I understand my experience of that fusing of my mind with my daughter, my partner, the person sitting next to me on retreat? Sometimes called intuition. Yeah, we have that. You know, I also, you know, we often have that. For example, if we're reading a book, you know, we kind of get the feeling of the author and so forth. And that's also why we can say there's a lot of blessing in reading Dharma books, because we get the blessing of the teacher. But yes, we do fuse our mind with various people. So we want to fuse our mind with the guru, because that's quite helpful. We definitely are, how do you say, affected by the presence of others. And that's why it's so important that we're affected by the guru as the significant other, in that sense, the highest, most important significant other. But yes, that's exactly what happens. Our mind is fusing with the persons that we are with or that we're thinking of. So being sensitive to that phenomenon, then we would want to spend time fusing our mind with the teacher. But that's also where we exactly have that. We can experience that. If we think of somebody, even they're not there, we have the feeling of them. And so similar also, we're not dependent on the teacher being physically there, just invoking the presence or the memory of the teacher. Our mind mingles with the teacher. So the bottom line is we're free to hang out with the teacher at any given moment. And this also, by the way, enables us to benefit others. When we're thinking of others, if we mingle the thought of the teacher in there, we would say there is some benefit in that. This is sometimes ways that we can help others in invisible ways. But also when we are interacting with people or in life in general, invoking the memory of the teacher, it changes completely changes our perception of the situation. Rinpoche says, Guru Yoga is the essence of the 84,000 teachings of the Dharma. There is nothing more profound and nothing more vast. All of you, fortunate disciples, should cherish this practice in your hearts. Even when you reach the age of 80, you should be like Pulse Rinpoche, who every morning, without fail, arouse devotion through the practice of this Guru Yoga. So that's actually this particular liturgy here, the Wishfulfilling jewel. Jakob Khyentse Rinpoche had thorough knowledge of the 8 chariots of accomplishment, meaning all the different lineages of practice in Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Yeah. He not only possessed knowledge of them, but had also practiced all of them. However, his main practice was this Guru Yoga of the Longchen Nyingtik. He prayed to Guru Rinpoche constantly. And you have this short little prayer in the middle of the Longchen Nyingtik Guru Yoga, Jetsun Guru Rinpoche, that very often is chanted. I think there's, what is there? There's maybe 8 lines or something like that. Anyway, Jaren Khyentse Wangpo prayed to Guru Rinpoche constantly, thinking that this Guru Yoga, though very easy to practice and experience, was at the same time a most extraordinary, profound practice. He unfailingly taught it to his students. There may be very high practices, like Trekchen and Turgel, which are then the practices of Dzogchen, in the great Tsogpa Chimbo, or we sometimes say Ati Yoga, and so forth. But for us to practice these at this point would be like giving solid food to a very young baby. We would not be able to assimilate such food, and it would just cause the baby harm. If we were now to try to practice those advanced teachings, they would just be wasted. Through the blessings that come from genuine endeavor in the practice of this Guru Yoga, on the other hand, the realization of Dzogpa Chimpo will arise by itself from the depth of our being like the morning sun, and the meaning of the practices of Trekchen and Turgel will dawn within us. So this is also nowadays where we have people on the internet and the web just making instructions from the Great Perfection available. It's very often we have these rather sad and embarrassing statements like, well, now the Tibetans are deciding to share the Dzogchen teaching with the world. They're no longer holding back. That's not at all true. There's always been available. But the point is that we need to actually have the actual experience. And so while the practice of resting in the nature of mind, remaining uncontrived and all of that is very easily is very appealing, even to the ordinary habitual mind, without actual this blessing that touches on that which lies outside of the domain of ego, that lies outside the domain of the ordinary ignorance that drives samsara, without actually having tasted that, then the practices of Trekchen and Turgel will be just basically feed into habitual patterns, and the result, the actual objective of these practices will never manifest. So Rinpoche says we should not think that because this Guru Yoga practice is short, it is a minor practice, as though the Guru were just giving us a few morsels of food. It is not. It is the most essential practice of all. As Jigme Lingpa himself says in this text, this Guru Yoga opens the door to the sky treasury of this essential dharma, meaning this practice opens up to this vast expanse of the Longchen Nyingtik, the whole wisdom that comes down from Padmasambhava and Vimala Mitra and Longchenpa and so on, which is the subject or the core of the Longchen Nyingtik. And then referring to this Guru Yoga, Rinpoche says, it arose from the vast expanse of the realization of Jigme Lingpa. If we have confidence in him, we should also have confidence in this Guru Yoga. Without such confidence, any other profound teaching, such as the Yeshe Lama, which is the Longchen Nyingtik Dzogchen teaching, will be of no help. If you practice the Guru Yoga one-pointedly and refuse to fall into the error of viewing it as and refuse to fall into the error of viewing it as a minor practice, then the highest realization will dawn on its own. This Guru Yoga is referred to as an outer practice, but this is in no way a deprecatory term. For example, speech and mind depend on the outer envelope of the human body, without which any progress on the path would be difficult. So we rely on these relative reference points as our physical experience of existing, the verbal dimension of our existence, and all of that. These are very important. So integrating these are essential. Without integrating them, the whole practice of the path would be very difficult. So thanks to having these reference points of body, speech, body and speech, which is the emphasis then here in this particular practice, then any realization is highly unlikely to occur. So similar, Rinpoche says, Guru Yoga encompasses the whole path. These days, people seem to think that they should look for a more advanced practice, referring to practices like Dzogchen. They should remember that the greatest of teachers took this Guru Yoga as their main practice throughout their lives. So we should look how it actually has been practiced effectively. If we practice Kirim, meaning development stage practice, as we have already mentioned, we have to visualize clearly, we have to remember the symbolism, and we have to have the Vajra confidence that we are the deity. These are three essential aspects of development stage practice: visualization, the symbolism, and the confidence. In addition, we must attend to the different aspects of the recitation: the Nyemba, or the approaching, Drupa, accomplishing, and Drupchen, great accomplishment. We must persevere for months and years, accumulating many hundreds of thousands of mantra recitations before we can reap the fruit of the practice. Beyond this are also the four activities. This is pacifying, increasing, magnetizing, and destroying. And it said that if all of these aspects are not performed in a perfectly authentic way, then the ordinary and supreme accomplishments cannot be achieved through Kirim. So ordinary accomplishments are the accomplishments of long life, and basically enabling, extraordinary features of this ordinary reality. And then we have the supreme accomplishment, which is then the falling away of delusion and the accomplishment of enlightenment. But if these practices of the development stage aren't done properly, then nothing such as these ordinary and supreme accomplishments can be achieved. In Sokrim too, we must endeavor for a long time in practices that are not without danger if not practiced correctly, such as the practices of Tummo and so on. But in Guru Yoga, if we have the ring of faith, right, this is our faith, then the hook of the Guru's compassion and wisdom will easily take us to ultimate realization, these two conditions coming together. It is Guru Rinpoche himself who granted this Guru Yoga practice. It's said that in the prophecies of the Longchen Nyingtik, in there it says, from within the palace of the central channel, the Guru Pema Tönchen Cell will grant this instruction, bestowing his blessing in a symbolic way. So this is where the origins of this Guru Yoga goes right back to Guru Padmasambhava. Rinpoche says the palace of the central channel is the luminosity of mind as such. So when we talk about the central channel, we sometimes think of it in yoga terms, but it's also that which is beyond any extremes or any conceptual references whatsoever, the luminosity of the mind itself. And Rinpoche says, while Pema Tönchen Cell means lotus strength of the skull garland, here lotus is Guru Rinpoche's name, and this garland of skulls that he wears represents the death of all deluded thoughts and the victory of total awareness. So we very often see deities wearing these garlands of skulls, and it is where the actual primordially pure awareness is free from all these the ordinary conceptual thoughts. So they're portrayed as skulls, meaning their power had been put to an end. But they're not thrown away, they're worn as ornaments. This passage from the text also means that the inner realization of Jigme Lingpa had become equal to that of Guru Rinpoche. So Jigme Lingpa says this arose in his experience. As we have seen earlier, the prophecy related to the Longchen Nyingtik clearly indicates that all beings who make connection with these teachings and practices, particularly this Guru Yoga and also the Rinzendrupa, the main sadhana, the main guru sadhana, will reach the celestial fields of the copper-colored mountain, meaning all delusion will fall away and all our appearances and perception will manifest as the display of enlightenment. We should have firm confidence in this and practice one pointedly. If we practice in this way for, say, 1 year, and yet experience no extraordinary realization, we should not be discouraged, nor should we succumb to doubts about the practice. As Jetsun Milarepa said, do not entertain hopes for an immediate realization, but practice all your life. If we think with complete determination, I will practice until my body is taken to the cemetery, then all the experience and realizations of the path will arise naturally. If, on the other hand, we practice for only a short time with impatience, then these experiences will not occur. So if we maintain this sort of vast mind that understands the value of this, yes, there might be some obscurations that prevent immediate experiences to manifest, but we should, valuing the objective and the truth of this path, we should just persevere. There's absolutely nothing that is not good about it. But if we think, okay, this should help me do something, basically still entertaining this impatient, small, self-centered notion of I want results, I want stuff, something tangible should happen. Then, of course, we're basically sustaining the habitual pattern that has kept us in samsara forever. So if we do that, then yes, experiences will not occur. As it is said, the Dharma has no owner except those who persevere in it. If one has the determination to practice the Dharma, it is there, ready to be practiced. So the Dharma is not something, the Holy Dharma is not something that's external to us. It's something that we need to uncover, but aligning ourselves with the inner Dharma that's already there as our original nature through the practice of the skillful means of the relative Dharma, then for sure we will connect with this nature. So with that determination to practice the Dharma, we should do that with the sense that this is touching and aligning us with something that has already been there. So practicing the Dharma is not incorporating something new, it's a method to bring forth what was already there. So I think we're looking at the end of the work here. Yeah. So any questions? Yeah? Any questions? Well, then I would just say read this again and again, especially those of us who are practicing the Vajrayana. This is something we continually come back to. It's something that enhances the practice, and it's also something that when we encounter difficulties, just reading a few lines from a work like this is something that gives us a whole different perspective and infuses us with a lot of inspiration about how to proceed on the path. I think it's in Reign of Wisdom, Trungpa Rinpoche says that when he has difficulty, he found that rather than taking some aspirin, then reading 4 lines from the songs of the masters of the path was far more beneficial. And in this work, then we have Rinpoche's spirit and profound instructions that really serve as such a guiding light. So I hope this has been useful. Thank you very much. Some people are saying that they found this very helpful and inspirational. So that's good. Okay. Good. All right. So I'll just mention this book that we'll be studying starting 19th of March. And it's a work that's called Mindfulness in Action. And mindfulness in action basically are instructions on shamatha and vipassana. In the Buddhist path, we need to work with them. We're working primarily with the mind, and unless we have peace of mind, and within that peace of mind also freedom from the grip that our psychology, our thinking, our concepts, attitude, and so forth ordinarily has on us, without freeing ourselves from that grip, we'll never really be able to integrate this vast vision that the Buddhist teaching is proposing, this freedom from our confusion. So we need what's called samadhi. We need to have a place where the mind is settled and open and connected to us and the world. And that is achieved through the practice of mindfulness and awareness, mindfulness and this vast perspective, shamatha and vipassana. So we can't invest enough into researching this, both in terms of the actual practice, but also in terms of clarifying the theory. So we know what's supposed to be happening, what is the logic of it, what is the nature of what we're undertaking. So this is very important. So regardless of whether we're practicing the preliminaries, whether we're practicing the preliminaries or the main part, we need samadhi, we need meditation. Sorry, yes, no, we're starting February 19. Thank you for catching that. I did say March, didn't I? Yeah, because there's these Monday programs, that I do, that we're doing in Mullumbimby, which is also a webinar on Mondays. That's starting on March 2nd. So I was thinking March, but this study here will start February 19. Okay. Thank you. Through this virtue may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the Holy Gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you.